Hey, this is Tommy. I had originally shot the introduction you're going to see back in the summer, and as I am a professional academic, sometimes things get away from you, and so that was recorded in August. It's now March. Um, well, the truth is, I'm a lot closer to being done with my present academic work. So my university has been shut down for 2 weeks while they set up telework, which I will be doing for the rest of the semester. Um, so, yeah, things got away from me. But now that I'm basically stuck in the house until August, I have nothing better to do. I'm going to shoot a channel introduction video soon, so I will explain where the name Creepy Puppets Presents comes from. I know it's a little bit weird, but it's kind of an in-joke, and I will explain that at some point. So, it seems to me that since the LIPS Conference 2020 was canceled, I would shoot this new introduction for LIPS Conference 2019, and maybe at some point in the future I'll make a video of myself giving the lecture I would have given at LIPS 2020. That said, everyone take care, all right? Okay. Enjoy the introduction and then the lecture. God bless. Hello and welcome. As the reader is probably aware, I am a working academic. I'm halfway through my master's degree in biology. However, my undergraduate work was very much in philosophy. I did my undergraduate work at Rutgers University and studied epistemology there under the eminent epistemologist Peter Klein. So in April of 2019, I submitted a paper to the Long Island Philosophy Conference in SUNY in Suffolk County on Long Island, the LIPS Conference for short. This paper dealt with the question of let's call it neurodivergence and the impacts for epistemology, how we can know things, how people have neurologically based differences in cognition. This is only a tiny area, as a surface scratching paper of a much bigger topic. About the video itself, it is a temporary, I apologize for the quality of this video. It's a temporary fix. I hope to have a better camera up working soon. As far as the video itself, there's nothing I can do about that. It was shot on an iPhone 6. I think the quality for being shot on an iPhone 6 is miraculous, so that's what you got. Right, what follows is the report, and then Q&A. So, my name is Tommy O'Rourke from Bloomsburg University. No, I'm not related to Beto, although I am exceptionally happy to have someone with my last name running for president so that people will finally pronounce it correctly. Only thing would be better is if I'm like one of the 5 Americans with the last name Buttigieg. So I want to tell you a little bit about my CV first because it's relevant to how this paper came together. So I graduated in 2013 with a Bachelor's of Art in Philosophy from Rutgers University. Some of the professors I encountered there were Tim Maudlin for Philosophy of Science and Larry Temkin for Ethics, but the philosopher that made the biggest impact on me, as you'll see, is Peter Klein of Epistemology. So after graduating, I did the usual thing that people do with philosophy degrees. I went to law school, and I hated it, and I left. So I did a bunch of odd jobs, including working as an elementary school librarian and selling insurance, But eventually the sweet siren call of academia got me. So I ended up at Bloomsburg University as a teaching assistant in the biology department. That was my minor. I'm expanding it into a master's degree. As I mentioned before, my area of research is entomology. I'm working on the colony collapse problem. I'm sure you've heard of that, the bees that dropped dead. I'm a computational biologist, so I'm writing computer systems to help model the colony collapse problem. So having done this, I still wanted to stay active in the philosophy community that I love, so I walked across the quad to the philosophy department, and I grabbed the first professor I found and say, hey, can you use me? It's Dr. Kurt Smith at Bloomsburg. So he had a senior seminar on Eastern philosophy, and I sat in on it, volunteer teaching assistant, and to show the students how to write a proper paper, I wrote this paper, and it was originally much more about Eastern philosophy. It's still in there to some extent, but I've taken most of that out. So what I've been able to sort of do here, you'll see it in there. I've cleaned it up and made it a more general audience paper, but that's the origin of it. So as our wonderful chair pointed out, the title is The Philosophical Implications of Neurodiversity with Respect to Intuition and Cognition. So I want to define those two words first. So, our conception rather. So I use the word conception as, does everyone remember when you were a kid, maybe you had this like optical illusion like this, and is it a duck or a bunny? You didn't know. And so what we think about this is that we are imposing our conceptions onto it. And this is just a really obvious case. But one of the questions that have interested philosophers, at least since Kant, is how much structure are we imposing on the world? The Molyneux's problem is another example. If you give a blind person a cube and then restore his sight, would they be able to tell the difference? Recent science actually has been able to do that and has determined that no, it appears like you have to learn to see and impose structure on the world. In Eastern philosophy, this is a much older question. The Buddha himself thought that basically we could impose all of our structure on phenomenon. In fact, the reason we are already one with everything, argues the Buddhist, is that the distinction between self and not self is one of these arbitrarily imposed constructions. So this is the conception issue that I'm talking about. And the second issue I'm talking about, intuition. If you've taken an introduction to philosophy class, you were probably presented with the trolley problem, which is the following. So suppose you have a trolley going down a track, it's out of control. If it stays on its present course, it's going to kill 5 people. You can flip a switch and make it go down this track, but it's going to kill 1 person. Let 5 die versus kill 1. What do you do? You've just taken intro to philosophy, right? Did you get this problem?
No, we went into issues of philosophy.
Okay. So we start with these thought experiments and we develop these intuitions, and that's the starting point for our conversation about philosophy. It's an essential piece of the philosophy perspective. So my argument is that both of these, both an insight into how they work and how they might differ, can be achieved by looking at neurodiversity. Now, the phrase neurodiversity originated in the autism community. It refers to people with neurological differences who don't necessarily see them as disorders or disabilities. It's a very, celebration of differences kind of terminology. It's the most positive terminology out there, so I'm choosing to use it. So it refers to things like autism, of course, dyslexia, ADHD, some people who are born with hearing and visual impairments, so certain kinds of deafness and blindness. forgive my terrible word writing hand. So some people argue, and there's some evidence for this, that the transgenderism is also part of this neurodiversity camp, and there are some people who support that claim. But that's exceptionally controversial. I'd rather not poke that hornet's nest. So we're just going to forget I said it, okay? Okay. So, point of full disclosure. When I was a child, 5 or 6 years old, I was diagnosed with autism. Now, in my case, the way autism is constructed in the medical community is as a dysfunction of social learning. I don't have that problem anymore. I used to when I was younger, but I think I'm damn charming. Yeah? Okay, so I had my diagnosis medically vacated on those grounds. But my underlying neurology is still a little bit different from you normal folks. And I say this because, so I still have perceptual difficulties, bright lights, bright colors. They drive me crazy. Also, I have a very poor sense of balance. You'll see me as I speak kind of do this. I sometimes like start to fall over and don't realize it until I'm on the ground. Okay? So that's issues that I have. But so I have basically 2 kinds of examples. And I have a little chart. So the first set of examples, these are the science examples. What science says about what neurodiverse communities probably have experienced. And then there are my example set 2. These are personal intuitions of mine that none of you normies actually seem to share with me. So I'm just gonna, there's a little bit of hand waviness to these, but I still want to bring them up because I think that actually most of the more important ones are on that side. So I'm just going to give a brief rundown. So first, I'll stick with the one that's closest to my heart. Art that's bright or loud. Loud. What I mean by this is people who have sensitivity issues, when looking at, say, bright or clashing colors, often feel physical pain or other strong distress when looking at those kinds of things. For them, any intuition they have about the beautiful is probably going to preclude those things. Ditto for like loud headbanger music, right? So they're probably not going to have the intuition, and more than the intuition, right? If you were like going to create art, you might, and you had this particular sensitivity issue, you might yourself not do something loud or brightly colored. I actually had, between submitting the paper and now, I had this experience personally. A coworker of mine, the professor in the nursing department at Bloom's, whose office is right across the hall from my lab, she had a blue blazer on that was a very vibrant shade of blue. It was so blue that I couldn't look at it. It felt like something was trying to claw its way out of my eyes when I looked at it. Now, I told her that I'm sure it's a very conventionally beautiful sweater, but I can't look at it. I have to look like away. So I can't exactly say that for me, beauty is something painful to look at. This doesn't just go for people with sensitivity issues. For dyslexia, we might consider whether or not calligraphy has a different meaning. So, is anyone in here with dyslexia? No? Okay.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. So, for most people, we like the pretty shapes of calligraphy, but we also get some kind of meaning out of it. And especially for calligraphy in our own language. Now, yes, we can appreciate Chinese calligraphy, and we can appreciate Arabic calligraphy if we don't speak those languages. But I think there's something special about, say, English calligraphy for an English speaker. Because we're not only getting the beautiful shape, but we're also getting the meaning. For a person with dyslexia, such calligraphy might be the way we look at Arabic calligraphy. Or if you wanted to try to extract meaning from it, it becomes a chore. So in that circumstance, they might have a different conception of the beauty of calligraphy. Last art example, I promise. So I'm going to be a little bit delicate about this matter. I do not like to be touched. So my conception of this, the conception about the content of art. In my case, eroticism is not what most people think. Like, to me, the thought of being gently caressed is absolutely horrifying. So the content of my intuition of what makes good art is probably different from yours. Okay. The final example from the general science is dialogue. So we know from philosophy that a big part of our tradition is Socratic dialogue. That we arrive at truth through this conversational interaction. Some might describe it as two souls vying for one another to arrive at a common truth. If you have problems with speech or problems with social interaction, your conception of the Socratic dialogue process might be innately different. For me, when I'm talking to people, it's like I have to load a pre-written script in my mind. And if people abruptly change conversation, I'm like, I have to load a new script. I get old Windows users, the blue screen of death in my mind, right? So I think that's another important potential area. But what I think a lot of these have in common is a thought that should disturb us to some degree. If there is a true definition of art, or if there is a true definition, an objective definition of the truth of dialogue or the beauty of calligraphy, maybe some people, for neurological differences, are precluded from that definition of truth, of beauty, whatever. And I think we should find that deeply disturbing on some level. If there's a different quality to the philosophy of someone with speech pathology issues to someone who has, say, neurotypical is the opposite of neurodiverse brain. Okay, so that's just sort of the quick examples I have, but I want to get to a couple of personal cases. And this is where the Asian philosophy is a little more relevant. In the Upanishad, which is one of the holiest books in Hinduism, there's a dialogue between Yama, the god of death, and Nachiketas, the boy sage, the main character of the story. And in it, Yama gives this description of a theory of mind. So it's an ancient Hindu theory of mind. And what he says is something like this. We have the senses, and we have the word in Sanskrit is buddhi, the intellect, and here is the Atman, or the soul. And he says between the two lies a bridge of connectivity. And the word for this in Sanskrit is manas. I'm just writing it in Devanagari script at the moment. And manas is a cognate to the Latin mens, mentis. It means mind in an etymological sense, right? So he says, or Yama says, I know it's weird to be quoting a god in philosophy, but not in theology, but anyway. So Yama says that this is how our brain works. We have our intellect, and we have our senses, and there's a distance between them, and there's this thing, this manas, that connects the two, and it's a fragile sort of connection. He uses the analogy of a chariot. These are the horses, this is the driver, this is the owner, and these are the reins. Now, when I was explaining this to our Eastern philosophy students, I got very many puzzled looks. And what I thought originally was, oh, it's just because they're wrapped up in the Western conception of mind. But as I kept trying to explain it over and over again to my increasing frustration, I thought perhaps it's because they just don't have this intuition that there is a fragile connection between the intellect and the senses. For them, perhaps these two circles touch each other directly in their minds, their self-reflective minds. But for me, there's no defect in my senses that I'm aware of, and there's no defect in my intellect that I'm aware of. But my perceptual difficulties come from here. Perhaps in the Ayurvedic tradition, the Hindu medical tradition, our problems of autism and people with perceptual difficulties is a problem of the manas. That because this connection, for me, doesn't work the same way it does for other people, it's immediately obvious to me that this makes sense. Because I remember when I read it in sophomore year of college, my immediate reaction was, oh, that makes complete and utter sense. So, time-wise, you good? Okay. So I want to spend the next 15 minutes or so on my last example, because I think it's probably the most important. If you are unfamiliar with the Gettier Problem, is there anyone not familiar with Gettier? Okay, so we'll do a very thorough, quick as we can, refresher of the Gettier Problem. So the Gettier Problem, people used to think that knowledge is equal to justified true belief, JTB. Now, in the 60s, this guy named Edmund Gettier wrote a paper, and he says, I can think of examples of justified true belief that are not knowledge. And so, there's a whole bunch of these Gettier cases, but I'm going to go with one that's my favorite. So, imagine you have a field, a farmer's field, and another hill, right? And on this hill is the farmer's house, and he's got a little back deck, and he's standing there as Farmer Brown, and he's standing there with Farmer Jones. Tommy story time, right? So down here, he sees a cow-shaped object. And so I don't have to keep saying cow-shaped object. I'm going to call this a cow-morph. We good on what that terminology means? So Farmer Brown says to Farmer Jones, there in the field, there is my prize-winning cow Bessie. I know Bessie is in the field because I can see a cow-shaped object in the field. Well, it turns out that the night before, a group of university students from the nearby, philosophy students from a nearby university decided to pull an epistemological prank on Farmer Brown. And they made a cardboard cutout of a cow and put it in his field. But right behind the cow morph, as he was looking down, the real Bessies. Right? So if the claim is Bessie in field, well, that's true. Yeah? He's justified because he saw a cow-shaped object, and we usually think that our senses are reliable enough to provide justification. So he's got a justified belief, and obviously he believed that Bessie's in the field. He said, so this is an instance of justified true belief that many of us don't think is knowledge. So my contention, when I was first sitting in Peter Klein's class learning about this, is that this is cow shit. Cow-shaped objects, right? And I still think that is the case. But the reason I do, I've never met anyone else who shares my intuition about why this is a problem. And there are lots of theories published on Gettier problems. Maybe it's not enough justification. Maybe it's not true in the right sense. My answer is he doesn't believe Bessie is in the field. Now, I'm not saying this is the correct answer to the Gettier problem. All I'm saying is that this is my gut intuition upon encountering the problem. So my contention is he doesn't believe that Bessie's in the field. He believes Bessie's in the field and cow-morph is Bessie. This is what he actually believes. Bessie's in the field, Palmworth is Bessie. And if we remember our basic truth tables, this is true, this is false, which makes the whole conjunction false. So he doesn't have he has a justified belief, but it's not true. So it's not justified true belief. Okay, that's not terribly controversial, but what most people will then say is, well, okay, if I believe A and I believe B, then by logic, with an elimination move, I ought to believe A. And I say, yeah, you can do that, but I still believe the conjunction. Like, this implies that I basically deleted B from my consciousness. Like, we've all seen the movie Men in Black, right? It requires, like, I need one of those things to flash the false end of my conjunction away. So, you know, I deny that he believes A just on its own. So that's why. So in this case, yeah, okay, this is justified. Oh, maybe it's justified. It's reasoning from a false premise. And it's true, but I don't think he believes it. So in either case, you've got a justified false belief or a justified true non-belief. And neither case is a counterexample to the claim that justified true belief is knowledge. Again, this is just my intuition upon first hearing the problem. No real deep reflection on it, just my initial duh. So, in my last couple of minutes here, I actually got through all I had prepared faster than I thought I was going to. So I'm going to actually expand on this just a little bit. There's a section I cut for time from my paper. We remember that I said my mentor at Rutgers was Peter Klein. Peter Klein is famous for making a set of claims called useful falsehoods. I'm not going to draw this, but I'm just going to explain it. Useful falsehoods are, Virginia goes to her parents and says, "Mommy and Daddy, tell me about Santa Claus." And Virginia's parents tell her that Santa Claus comes down the chimney on Christmas Eve and puts presents underneath the tree. Virginia believes that there will be presents on Christmas morning. She has a justification. She has reliable witnesses. And it's true, there are presents on Christmas Eve, that morning. So we have a justified true belief. And the intuition we're supposed to have is that she really does know that there's going to be presents under the tree on Christmas morning. How can we justify that intuition with this intuition? I share the intuition that Peter Klein has, and I'm not just saying that because he was my favorite professor. But I actually think that that's an appeal to another definition of truth. Like, I think this is a correspondence theory of truth, and I think that Peter Klein's case is a pragmatic theory of truth. It's a pragmatically useful theory. It's true on a pragmatic scale, whereas this isn't. The probability that every time Farmer Brown looks and sees this, that Bessie will be standing right behind it, is very small. So it's not a very useful theory. But the theory that Santa Claus will bring presents under the tree, so long as her parents keep putting presents under the tree and don't tell her the truth about it, my apologies if Santa Claus does exist, is that that's a pragmatic theory of truth, and this isn't. So those are my sort of intuitive responses. But like I said, I've never seen anyone present the Gettier problem with this set of intuitions or read papers on it. So if anyone has read a paper where someone has a similar intuition about the case, please tell me, because I hadn't heard of it before. So before I let you go with questions, I want to address the elephant-shaped objects in the room. So there are a lot of ethics and justice issues surrounding the neurodiversity community. Today, I have only focused on the epistemological. By doing that, I am not implying that those ethical and justice issues aren't serious. They are. They are, and they deserve their own topics, their own talks. So I just wanted to make that clear. I want to say that New York right now is suffering from a measles outbreak because some people think that it would be better that I died of smallpox than exist right now. So anti-vaxxerism is not just stupid and harmful. It is ableist bigotry, and it should be confronted as such. Thank you. Yes.
So thanks for your talk. A couple things. I don't know if you're familiar with Edward Meshry. He's at the University of Pittsburgh. He's a philosopher of science, and he's done some experimental philosophy on Eastern Asian populations and their intuitions regarding Gettier cases.
Yes.
So that might be interesting to look into. I don't know what his conclusions are.
So I'm unfamiliar with that paper, but Stephen Stitch at Rutgers published a paper recently where he said they looked cross-culturally at Gettier responses and said that there is no statistically significant difference between different populations and the response to Gettier cases.
Okay.
Now, so I'm a computational biologist. I don't have time to do an experimental philosophy paper, or a study. So this is kind of my call to action. I would be really cool to see, I think we should poll neurodiverse communities and get their intuitions on these issues. I just don't have the time or funding to do it. But thank you for that name. I will definitely read him. Any other questions?
I was going to add also, just why was the Santa case incompatible with correspondence theory?
Well, because Santa Claus, God forbid, isn't real.
Well, but so what's the belief that the child has that is? So she still has the belief that there's going to be presence, and that's
right,
still
but
true.
she has it because, okay, so to mirror this case, right, what she believes specifically is, I'm going to write over here, I hope that's all right, presence under tree and Santa brought them. Now, if I use the same framework I did with the cow case, then she shouldn't know that there's going to be presents under the tree because for the same reasons over there. So somehow, this conjunction, if I'm to be consistent in my intuitions, this has to be true somehow. And the only explanation I can think of, again, I'm not terribly reflective on this, it's just, is that this is true in a different sense. So that's what I mean. This is, you would agree with me that this is false on a correspondence theory of truth.
If you, right, yeah.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. This would have to be false, and we should reject it as knowledge for the same reason.
Okay.
So yes, I also didn't bring my exact paper with me. I just brought my lecture notes. So.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Anyone else? Yes.
So you're saying, in matter of perspective, no matter what the individual's opinion is, there will always be an absolute fact that the belief will be based off of.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what you're asking.
Like your Santa Claus case, for example, there's the fact that there will be presents under the tree unless, God forbid, the parents fail to deliver.
Right.
So, but then the belief that the child has based off of that fact is that Santa Claus is the person bringing the presents.
The child's belief is the two together. The child believes there will be presents under the tree, and Santa Claus brought them. Okay. Now, what's the rest of your question?
The child's belief that Santa brought the presents is based off of the fact that there will be presents under the tree.
No, it's based on the fact that the parents, who we generally consider reliable testimony, unless you don't like your parents, so that's a justified belief. So they have a belief and they have a justification for believing it. Now, the only thing is it true or false? I think that it's true in the important sense. Okay. Because if I didn't, then this explanation would fall apart for the Gettier problem. Did I answer your question? Okay. Yes?
So when you talk about, back to your examples of science and calligraphy and art, you're getting across the point that, well, say, what's the term?
Neurodiversity.
No, the other flip side.
Neurotypical.
Neurotypical, or normies, or whatever. Neurotypical, that would be, it's challenging the intuition that neurotypicals tend to have, that these things are kind of objectively considered to be certain things, right? The idea that this
Well,
is
it could be raised as an objection. I mean, it might be the case, for example, it might be the case that normies think that clashing art and headbanger music isn't beautiful either. But I'm saying that the possibility for a difference has to exist.
Okay, so your example of madness, which I'll be honest, was a little hard to understand for me. I'm not used to philosophy. That's an example of, say, taking something that would be almost like a mind-body problem, phrasing it in this interesting neurodiverse sense. I mean, not neurodiverse, I mean, it comes from Hinduism, but
Right.
you're framing it like that.
So it's not quite the same as our mind-body problem, right? Because this is the soul, and this is basically the private part of our mind, which the Hindus believed was part of the body. And then you've got these, which are obvious parts of the body, the sensory things, and they think that this part is also part of the body, and it's in between the two. So it's kind of a Hindu equivalent of the problem, but it's not exactly the same as the Western version.
Just the overall idea that you're trying to frame what a neurotypical would usually think of as epistemologically certain or settled, at least in a general sense, as, hey, there's room to look at these other cases, there's room to kind of doubt that maybe there's more subjectivism, or maybe there's not as certain.
Right. So I want to raise people who are normies who might have one set of intuitions, the possibility that there are a whole other sets of intuitions out there that maybe we don't know about because we haven't studied. We should do maybe some experimental philosophy. You know, what are the philosophical implications of there being another set of intuitions, another set of structures that are being imposed on reality? What are those? And that's what I've been trying to get at, the philosophical implications. The implications for the theory of, for the things that they're about, so the implications for the theory of beauty, implications for whether or not certain people can be excluded from certain philosophical stances. So if there is a different standard of beauty, are certain people precluded from perceiving? As an example, I think comes from Wittgenstein, where he says, you know, his cat or his dog is colorblind, but that doesn't mean that color was irrelevant for him, or his cat can't do calculus. So maybe there's a higher truth that we perceive that dogs don't. But the question is, are we the dogs in this case? Or are you the normies, the dogs in this case? Either way should frighten us on some level, because I think it introduces a kind of stratification into humanity that we should be uncomfortable with and we have to work around. Yes?
Thanks, Murdoch. I have a question about neurodiversity more generally that I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about. I was thinking about like the use of psychedelic drugs and how that alters neural activities and
right.
Sort of changes the patterns of activity. But I was wondering, are you suggesting that those changes that can come out of different types of drug interactions could also indicate that there's maybe some intuitions that are coming out of that? Because I think a lot of people tend to all of a sudden have those great awakening feelings.
So I've left the concept of hallucinogens off the table, but that actually it speaks much more to this issue of conception. Right? It speaks to duck, rabbit, take some LSD, it could be a dragon for all I know. It could be a chair. So it's certainly true that basically our brains work by putting things in easily compatible compartments. You would agree with that assessment, right? Yeah. Okay. He's more mind than I am. Knows more about the theory of mind than I do. So it seems like what LSD does is it smashes the boxes, and so it compels you to be out-of-the-box thinkers. There was a fascinating study, and I don't remember the citation, so don't ask. Before LSD became illegal, where they took two groups of scientists, and they gave one acid and one placebo. The ones on acid were more productive, and it's thought because they were out-of-the-box thinkers because the drug forced them to be out of the box. So yes, look, the short answer is psychedelics do play a role in this conversation, but it's a part of the conversation that I was having a different part of the conversation. Anyone else? Sure.
Since nobody else has a question right now, we have a little bit of time.
So one comment and one two-part question. So the comment was, I'm not sure that it has to be worrying that neurotypical and neurodiverse people might encounter different phenomena as beautiful, because the underlying principles might be similar. So it's well known that people in the West experience Eastern music as dissonant. People in the East don't necessarily experience it as dissonant. Just that what sets the conditions for dissonance versus harmony are different because of the way people are exposed to sound statistically over the course of their lives.
Right. So I think that the response is that, I'm not claiming that this or drugs are exclusively the domain. Like, there's obviously a dimension of social construction. In fact, I'm more inclined to think that the beauty is socially constructed than that it is some objective value out in the universe. But I don't think that that's a criticism of I don't think that's necessarily a problem with this view.
Oh no, I wasn't necessarily offering it as a problem, just as a possible modification for the worry that you were expressing. It's
Sure.
one potential
Sure.
interpretation.
And if we're considering that,
Yeah. And then the other question I had was, all right, so it seems clear enough that one of the implications of what you're saying is that it might challenge intuitions that operate as premises in various arguments because it introduces a note of controversy.
possibly, yeah.
Another possible implication might be that by understanding these differing intuitions in neurodiverse people, we understand the nature of their neurodiversity better. I was wondering, do you think that it's possible to predict that neurodiverse people have different intuitions about certain kinds of conceptions?
Well,
Or is that a more thoroughgoing theory of autism or something?
So I've focused on autism a bit more than other forms of neurodiversity for the obvious reasons that I know it better than the others. But yeah, I think it's possible to predict potential differences between normal intuitions and neurodiverse intuitions. It's possible to predict places where they might arrive, not that they will necessarily be there.
Right. Very good. That could be a very interesting way to guide a possible polling study, which you suggested
Right.
itself very interesting.
I should have mentioned I was writing this at the same time I was preparing my thesis proposal, so there's a lot of proposal overlap.
No, that's a great thing. All right, are there any other questions? A couple more minutes if anyone does. Otherwise, let's thank Tommy for a very interesting talk.
Okay, so you've just seen the video. There's a lot of stuff in there that is maybe a bit overwhelming if you haven't taken a philosophy of knowledge course and aren't really familiar with the background conversation. Now, in the Q&A, the video gets worse, and it's almost impossible to hear some of the questions being asked. But if you bear with it, I think it can be very helpful for elucidating some of the things. All right, well, that was my LIPS lecture. I hope you enjoyed it and found it entertaining and interesting. Look forward to future talks on this channel, and have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.